Time is a funny thing. It's loved and hated, feared and cherished. It sometimes crawls and sometimes runs, but it's always biting at our conscience. It's the only constant. And for Speedcubers, time is everything.
Wow. Ow! Oh, come on, get a sub 5.
4.22 seconds. That's the time it takes a top Speedcuber to solve a Rubik's Cube. People can't even tie their shoes in that time, but there's a whole world of people who solve the Rubik's Cube that fast, or at least try to. This is my attempt at becoming an elite Speedcuber by surpassing the elusive 15-second time barrier. This piece of plastic has confused and fascinated the recent generation. Invented in 1974 by Erno Rubik, this was originally intended to be a model of how things moved in 3D space, and not intended to be a toy or a puzzle. But it has since become the best-selling toy in the world, ironically enough. And it has penetrated modern pop culture to become some sort of cultural icon. It's seen in movies, new and old.
You must have the sign.
I'm taking this cube thing with me. I don't understand it, but I will.
It has developed a sort of enigma around it. It's seen as impossible and mysterious. Are there some sort of secret algorithms? Is there some sort of trick besides peeling the stickers off? Well, I hate to break it to you, there really isn't. Solving the cube is more of a matter of patience, practice, and persistence rather than ingenuity. And with just a little bit of practice, I've been able to solve it in about a minute. Before we learn how to solve the cube, we must first understand how the cube works. The cube should not be thought of as individual stickers moving around, but rather pieces as a whole. If we just break it down, we can see that the cube is actually just composed of 3 pieces: the center, the edge, and the corner. To solve the cube, we must put each piece in its correct place. Now, how do we do that without taking it apart or peeling off the stickers? Well, the beginner's method approaches it in a layer-by-layer method. First, it builds the bottom layer, then the second layer, then the third. We start with the daisy. We align each of the white edges around the yellow center and slowly match the edge colors with the correct centers and put them on the white face. Thus, we've created the white cross, which is the foundation of the white side. Next, to finish the white side, we put the corners in its correct location around the first layer. Again, the same thing is done with the centers, making sure the side colors match. And then finally we get to the third layer. Now the third layer is a little more difficult because it requires algorithms. The first 2 layers are pretty much intuitive, and thus you don't have to memorize any algorithms. However, the third, in the beginner's method, is reduced to a couple of simple algorithms instead of remembering algorithms for every single pattern. Thus, you can reduce unknown patterns into patterns you already know, and solving the Rubik's Cube becomes much more simple. However, the beginner's method sacrifices speed for simplicity. But this is only the beginner's method. To surpass the 15-second time barrier, I have to enlist the help of one of the top Rubik's Cube solvers in the world, Ava Kato. Ava Kato is currently ranked as one of the fastest female Speedcubers in the world. She also runs an immensely popular YouTube channel with over 55,000 subscribers, and she is sponsored by thecubicle.us, one of the world's leading Speedcube retailers.
So before you do anything, I'd recommend buying the Speedcube, which is basically a faster Rubik's Cube. And I'd recommend either a Moyu, Gan, or Qi 3x3, and especially with magnets. Magnets are a recent but very important innovation that helps returning accuracy tremendously. And also more recently, Speedcubes have become a lot more customizable, so they can be more adaptive to each person. Next, I'd recommend learning finger tricks. So how you turn now can stress out your hands more, and it takes more time and effort for each turn. For example, if you do wrist turns, it's a less efficient way of turning rather than using multiple fingers. And the finger tricks that top speedcubers use flow right into each other, so there's less time in between each move, which is the most optimal.
So today Ava sent me one of her old speed cubes. This cube feels so much faster and smoother, and look, there's magnets which help the layers align. So when I turn, I can feel it stop me right when it's all aligned. It's pretty cool. So when you look at these two Rubik's cubes from the outside, they look pretty much the same. But trust me, they're not. The one on the left is a standard Rubik's cube, but the one on the right is a speed cube. But what is a speed cube? So the main difference with a speed cube is in how fast it is and how agile. So if we look at a normal Rubik's cube, it's very hard to turn with a single finger. And that hinders your speed because then you need the whole hand to turn it quickly. However, with a speed cube, you can use a finger to quickly flick the cube around in any way possible, like that. And with the difference in agility, there's a measure of its agility in speedcubing called corner cutting. If the cube is misaligned, corner cutting denotes its ability to actually turn even if it's misaligned. So on a normal cube, it will not turn, it will get stuck, or lock as speedcubers call it. However, if you look at a speed cube, it can corner cut, so therefore even if it's misaligned, the cube will still turn. Now externally, if you can tell, the big holes allow for the corners to slide past the centers without any locking occurring. However, with these, because they're so squared off, the corners catch on each other and you cannot even turn it if it's misaligned by a little bit because it'll get stuck. Internally, these are very different. The internal design of these speed cubes explains how it does such amazing things. The honeycomb pattern on the surface reduces the surface-to-surface contact and thus friction. So when these two move past each other, there's less friction, so it can move faster and you can turn quicker. Now if you look at the feet design, right here, it uses a different plastic, and this is a different type of plastic that it has a lower coefficient of friction and smaller grain structure. So they slide much more efficiently because this is where there's a lot of surface-to-surface contact and the place where you most need to reduce friction. Now if we look at the internals of the standard Rubik's Cube, you can see that everything is very square and thus a lot of catching will occur because of the sharp corners. Also, it's very flat and thus more friction, and overall the quality of the plastic is much worse. The feet design is much more simplified, and so it cannot corner cut or be as fast.
Once you've learned to turn faster, my biggest piece of advice is to learn CFOP, which is an advanced 3x3 method. And although when you're in the beginning, your times will be much slower, that's just because you need to get used to the method. So from there, once you practice enough, your time should get exponentially faster. CFOP reduces the amount of moves you need to solve by more than half. So less turns equates to more faster times. And combined with finger tricks, you're basically set to be a really fast speedcuber.
CFOP in the beginning was really confusing. A lot of the time I had no idea what was going on or what I was doing. And after seeing all those algorithms, memorizing them seemed really daunting. So I looked to Ava for help on how she memorized all these algorithms.
Memorization of algorithms. This is a tedious but vital step of speedcubing. One piece of advice I have to memorize algorithms is instead of, straight blunt memorization, you should probably learn by chunking, which is similar to how phone numbers are written to make them easier to remember. So this way you can break down the algorithm to certain triggers, which are short sets of moves that you should already know. For example, the sexy move RUR prime U prime is the most common example of a trigger, And the sexy move is found in a lot of algorithms, and it just makes the whole algorithm easier to remember if you break it down into moves and then sexy move and then more moves. So aside from that, like algorithms, you should just keep doing them over and over. Muscle memory will eventually kick in to the point where you won't need to think.
Listening to her advice, memorization became much easier, and within a few weeks I had committed all those algorithms to memory. After memorizing all those algorithms and working through every step of CFOP, it ultimately took me hours of practice every day to finally master it. CFOP basically works by condensing the beginner's method into a few steps. There's still the cross, but then in F2L, which is first two layers, you solve the first and second layers simultaneously as opposed to one by one. Then when you get to OLL, which stands for Orienting Last Layer, you choose 1 out of 57 algorithms based on the pattern in front of you. Then when we get to PLL, which stands for Permuting Last Layer, you choose from 21 algorithms based on the pattern in front of you. So although CFOP requires a lot more memorization, it reduces the number of moves needed to solve the cube, thus making it faster to solve. Yet just learning CFOP was not enough. I had to be able to streamline each step and make sure my solves were fluent and continuous.
The hardest part about CFOP is probably the brain or processing speed. You can really only solve as fast as your brain goes, not as fast as your hands go. So oftentimes, if you're fast, you will have long pauses in your solves. And there's no point in turning super fast if you're just going to pause for a few seconds to figure out what you're going to do next. So this is where something called look ahead kicks in. This is the technique of look ahead is basically focusing on what you need to do as your next step, as opposed to focusing on what you're solving like in the moment. I would recommend doing each step of CFOP blindfolded to train yourself to focus on the current step and make sure that it's very natural, so that you're able to look ahead to the next step.
Implementing her advice into my practice, I did countless solves every day. I sat in front of my computer as I watched my time steadily decrease. My times were under 15 seconds now. I felt relieved but also anxious at my upcoming competition.
The way speedcubing competitions work is that volunteers will scramble the cubes according to instructions that are generated by a computer. So the competitors all get the same scramble. They do 5 solves and their 3 middle scores are averaged.
There was nothing else I could do now, just practice. I practiced every moment I could, even when I wasn't supposed to. Walking into the building, I could hear the faint but distinct clack of the Rubik's Cube. However, the beating of my heart drowned it out. My hands were shaking as I knew this was the final test. I had 5 chances, but I had to make each one count. I expected to be greeted by fierce competition, but instead, I was immediately welcomed and found a place among other first-timers and veterans. They gave me tips as I watched them solve, leaving their secrets out in the open. My nervousness was slightly mollified, yet it still persisted in anticipation of my upcoming solve. I still remember how I trembled, cold sweat running down the side of my face as I sat down in front of the timer. That timer taunted me, assured that it had my fate in its hands. I paused for a moment, taking deep breaths as I looked over the cube, trying to plan 5 steps in advance, making sure I focused on every next move. Funny enough, to go fast, I had to slow down. If I turned too fast, I would get ahead of myself and be lost. I started solving and the colors blurred, but it felt natural. I didn't need to think, I just solved. The colors slowly aligned. 11.935, I had officially broken the 15-second time barrier. I can now comfortably surpass the 15-second time barrier. I'm very grateful for all the help that the cubing community and especially Ava has given to me. They're extremely generous and willing to help. Without them, I could have never learned a lot of the things about this Rubik's Cube that have helped me get so fast. From hardware to technique, all of these factors play a key role in one's speed. Yet, this cube has taught me many other things that I never thought it could have. It's taught me how to become a better memorizer and also how to deal with nerves from competitions, and all of these techniques can help me with my real life. From memorizing biology or history to nerves during a presentation or during a big test. Now, life will undoubtedly present every challenge except the Rubik's Cube. After all, it's just a piece of plastic, but what I have gained from this piece of plastic will help me no matter what I pursue. Good? Let's wash it over.